Today we're going to be exploring the aftermath of the most recent Commander ban list shakeup. We're going to be taking a look at a couple of cards and judging whether or not they should or should not come off the ban list at some point in the future. We're starting with a big one right out of the gates. Jeweled Lotus was one of the cards banned in late 2024, and it really sent ripples throughout the Commander community, to say the very least. This card has no home outside of Commander, and it was used as a selling point for sets like Commander Legends and Commander Masters, and it is virtually useless after the banning, unfortunately. Of course, Jeweled Lotus is really broken. It's a Black Lotus that only works for your commanders, so the justification was definitely there. Back when they banned this card, their reasoning was that Jeweled Lotus could help you cast a powerful commander on turn 1 or 2, without even needing a good hand, and a lot of 4 and 5 mana commanders could recoup the card disadvantage right away, so the Lotus just let you start out games way ahead of your opponents. Jeweled Lotus is way less offensive than Mana Crypt, and casual games are probably better without Lotus around, but this does feel like one of the cards that they could maybe eventually bring back. Remember that if a card gets unbanned, it automatically goes to the Game Changers list, so it's not like Jeweled Lotus would start ruining bracket 1 and 2 games, but it could probably be unbanned at some point in the future if for no reason other than it is a completely dead card in any format other than Commander. Iona, Shield of Emeria actually came up at the last BNR. The Commander format panel acknowledged that Iona can be incredibly unfun to play against, especially for mono-colored decks, and that people frequently cheat it out to avoid its really expensive mana cost. They actually said they were right on the cusp of unbanning Iona, but they wanted a way to get player feedback. Iona's a bit of a double-edged sword, if you ask me. It's probably safe to unban since most people will just weed it out of their playgroups anyway, but it can be a frustrating card to play against in the wild when you're just out playing against random people. You probably wouldn't see it played often, but if you did, you would probably just have to witness someone locking another person out of the game. Honestly, I think the multiplayer nature of Commander helps solve some of the problems that Iona causes. Yes, people cheat it into play, but the types of strategies that do that can do all sorts of broken things, and Iona is hardly the strongest creature available to cheat into play. Sundering Titan is a lot like Iona, and it fits a very similar category of cards that are straight up unfun to play against. It's also got a super high mana cost, but it's a colorless card, so it's a little easier to ramp into, and it can go into more decks overall. A perfect Sundering Titan will destroy 5 lands total and then do it again on the way out, so it's not even ideal to answer the Titan after it enters. It is absurd. Just one flicker effect destroys up to 10 lands total, which is usually enough to maim everyone's mana base without ever touching your own. Mass land destruction is truly just a beast in casual pods, and Sundering Titan takes that to the next level times a million. Keep Sundering Titan banned, please. Speaking of mass land destruction, we've got a card called Sylvan Primordial, and it has been banned for 10 entire years already. The difference with Primordial is that this one is more about the resources you get rather than the ones you take away. The fear with Sylvan Primordial is that somehow a player will get it down early and then snipe lands from their opponents and then ramp all in the process and be way ahead of everyone, and that is justified fear. That's probably the usual play pattern you'd see if this card got unbanned. If all goes well, it's a 7-for-1 that leaves a 6/8 reach creature in play. All of that said, this is one of the least offensive cards that we're actually going to be talking about today, and I would call it merely powerful instead of downright unbeatable. I say give Primordial a go and see if it outclasses the other crazy green monsters that we can currently ramp into. Y'all ever played against Seedborn Muse? It's an infamous game changer, and it is absolutely frightening. It totally warps games. Profit makes all the difference in the world. Being able to cast creature spells in your opponent's upkeeps after untapping all of your lands in Simic is very good. Opponent have a ton of mana rocks in play? Just flash in a Bane of Progress. Next opponent gonna draw a bunch of cards? Why not just flash in Consecrated Sphinx? Worried about a big swing? You will have the mana to flash in a Silent Arbiter. Prophet of Kruphix is so problematic because it's essentially 2 really good cards stapled together. Simply too much value for one card just for 5 mana. I'm no prophet myself, but I don't see this one ever coming off the ban list. Dockside Extortionist is just a broken magic card in every sense of the word. You just should not be able to play a 2-drop that generates a net positive amount of treasure tokens. It's the best ritual ever printed, and it combos with way too many things, since it's an ETB effect and the treasures come in untapped. I've heard arguments that Dockside is just fine in the early game. And to that I say, First off, Dockside can often generate 3 to 4 treasures in just the first few turn cycles of the game, depending on what people start out with. And later in the game, a huge burst of 5, 6, or 7 treasures, maybe even more, is still insane for 2 mana. You almost never play a 4-player game where Dockside isn't at least mana neutral, and that is all that you need to generate multitudinous infinite combos. I won't lie, it does feel like kind of a bummer when your opponent throws down a 2-drop creature and that feels like it's deciding the entire game. I would rather have Dockside stay banned, but what do you think? Let us know down in the comments. Golos Tireless Pilgrim has actually one of the most interesting ban list stories of them all. Golos is strong, no doubt, but it wasn't really banned for power level reasons. Instead, the reason Golos got axed is because it was hurting deck diversity. It turns out if you want to play a 5-color deck and make sure your commander always contributed to your plan, Golos was an easy way to make that happen. There's not a 5-color deck in the world that wouldn't mind getting an extra land drop out of its commander, and Golos has a universally playable activated ability that works for just about any strategy. It came to a point where Golos was just taking over Commander, and it was pushing out other commanders that were designed for specific strategies. Why play Rin and Seri when you can play all those cards in a Golos deck and have a really strong mana sink? Why build a Cool Teamer ramp deck when Golos is just gonna ramp you anyway and give you access to a bunch of other spells? Why bother doing anything when Golos can just help you chain together time walks and you can play a game of Magic the Gathering that lasts forever? Golos's 5-color identity actually hurt it as much as it helped, and as a result, Golos started showing up everywhere. But that was September 2021. 2026 now, folks, and I think it may be time to let the poor Pilgrim run free. There's so much more competition these days that even if Golos did show up a lot, it's just not the de facto best 5-color commander for every deck anymore. It could even work fine in the 99, you know? 5-color decks really do need as much ramp as they can possibly get. But that activated ability is really good, and I mean, it would definitely be a game changer, and it would be one of the game changiest. Of all the cards on this list, Griselbrand is probably the least likely to be unbanned. Why? Because it's a 7/7 flyer with lifelink. Surely it wasn't banned because its activated abilities is one of the best way to draw cards ever. No, that had nothing to do with it. 7 life may seem like a lot, but in Commander, that's 5 activations off your starting life total alone. 35 cards drawn. Minimum. And that's before Griselbrand starts connecting and giving you the resources to do another. Black gets access to several mana accelerants like Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Sacrifice, the list goes on. If it comes down in the early game, and you'd better believe Griselbrand players would be mulliganing for turn 1 Sol Ring, they'd be so far ahead that their opponents couldn't dream of coming back. Griselbrand makes it far too easy to assemble game-winning combos in Commander. Sure, it's 8 mana, but in the event that your opponents aren't holding up counter magic or removal, there's nothing to be done. There's just nothing to be done. Primeval Titan is a really funny card because every time we get to a BNR announcement, its price climbs up, 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 because people think it's gonna get unbanned, and then it doesn't get unbanned, and its price goes way back down. Happens every single time. So you might ask, is Primetime safe for Commander? It can ramp you in a way that not many other cards can. Just think about it for a second. Primeval Titan decks have historically been one of the best archetypes in Modern, where it wins with Amulet of Vigor and a combination of bounce lands and utility lands. Imagine what it could do in Commander, where it has access to not only those lands, but also every other land in all of Magic. Even if it's not straight up comboing off, the mana advantage here is ridiculous. If you can give Primeval Titan haste the turn it enters, you just played a 6 mana 6/6 Trampler that put the 4 best lands in your deck on the battlefield and threatens to ramp you even further ahead the next turn. Speaking of busted lands, this one's a little bit controversial, but not a lot of people talk about Library of Alexandria when they talk about Commander unbannings. There's sort of a general understanding that it's a powerful vintage-style Magic card, but not a lot of people have seen one or own a copy, and there's just not a lot of conversation around it. 2 things about Library here. First off, the restriction to activate Library is pretty real. You just don't have 7 cards in your hand all the time, and decks that are designed to draw tons and tons of cards usually go above the 7-card limit needed to activate Library, so you probably couldn't even activate it all that often if you could play it. You're basically strip mining yourself to use Library consistently. And every source of mana matters in Commander. Use that mana to cast some sort of draw engine and keep things going rather than worrying about tapping a land that you need 7 cards in your hand. Now, on the flip side, if you play Library on turn 1 and activate it before you draw your next card, you've effectively played a land that cantripped itself and is going to draw you more, which is insanely busted. All of this doesn't actually matter because there's one huge problem surrounding Library of Alexandria. Last time I checked, the card was nearly $1,000, and even more if you want a copy that's not damaged. So if everyone somehow agreed that Library should be unbanned, it might not be that fair because not a ton of people would be able to have access to this card. Obviously, price alone shouldn't be the only factor here. The Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale is over $2,000, and that card's not banned. But the combination of scarcity plus the potential for Library to create powerful opening hands probably isn't worth messing with it in the first place. Which is probably why no one even talks about it anyway. What do you think? Did we get things right? Did we get things horribly wrong? How do you feel? Let us know down below in the comment. I'm Eli with the Daily Upkeep. Take care, folks.